openly about, you know, what things could be achieved. Rather, you know, the city's probably mostly burdened with, you know, just making sure that the potholes are filled and the streets are maintained and the services are there.
Mm-hmm.
And unless new money is coming in, that's probably all you can really expect from the city for the most part. And I know there's more stimulus funding coming for some things, but you know, a lot of this is really about people and engaging people and not just putting out more things.
Yeah, and stimulus money helps you with a project or projects. It doesn't help you with your long-term ongoing. It fixes one particular problem or two or three problems, but it doesn't stop the city from being understaffed, under-resourced, and under funding continuously. And that's the, you know, I agree. I think that's one of the biggest impediments for the community. Belinda, did you want to say anything about this from your perspective?
Well, that's part of what, because I see that lack of funds city-wise, that we can't really do a lot. You know, as far as services go, that's kind of a part of what drives me with the new home sales, actually, is seeing that money come into town. And just to improve my town on a selfish level. But you know, kind of like glancing over this list, things that I hear in sales, in coming through the sales office is, why does the town look so sad? And like, how come these people aren't trying to fix up their buildings more? You know, that's that kind of look. And it's like, well, that's gonna be happening. We just need to grow more. As we grow more money flows, and then it's cyclical.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that sad look is the responsibility of the council? Because that's whose governance is. Do you know what I mean? Some of it's got to be because, for example, the city has no ordinance that says this building has been vacant and boarded up for 6 years, and they're not collecting any revenue for that. They're not saying, I'm going to incentivize you with a carrot and a stick to do something about that building. So it seems to me there's some level of responsibility / ownership of that issue, and some of it's just private, you know. Mm-hmm. Why do you own a building that's vacant for 6 years and boarded up?
Or in some cases, what is it, 25, 28 years for a couple of them now. But I do think that the city council does have a bit of a say. You know, I know when I lived up in Sacramento and having to hear about the revitalization of what Roseville was doing, how they were incentivizing people to get on board with a look they were trying to create, because that was just going to keep more money coming in with that look, since appearances is so important. You know, if even when it's just refreshing, you know, not necessarily refacing, but just even refreshing what's already there, just paint wise, you know, that can make a bit of a difference, because then people say, oh, well, at least they're being taken care of. Those awnings aren't, you know, torn. The flags aren't torn. The windows look clean, things like that. There's just not paper just put up all over the windows to look like it's abandoned. I think some ordinances would be nice to kind of say, hey, we need to stay within these guidelines to keep things looking cleaner. And, you know, like, things could happen. Here's your opportunity to, because when something's cleaner, people are more likely to want to go there. So I think if the city council had a little bit more control in how lax they are with what we see, that would definitely help take away that sad connotation that I hear a lot of.
Is that commentating that you're hearing specifically about the downtown commercial area? Are they also talking about neighborhoods? Just the downtown?
Downtown is what more people notice right off the bat to come to us,
Mm.
because they're driving right through it, or they're going right out of it and then coming back through it and then asking me more questions about it. Some people notice about the neighborhoods, and that strikes up a whole other conversation of, well, Guadalupe doesn't have a high turnover rate like Santa Maria does. So these houses are inherited, you know, 1 and 2, and now sometimes 3 times over. And not everybody understands what it takes to take care of a house, or they might not be in a financial place to make some of these changes. But we are seeing, like specifically in the Treasure Park area, there's quite a few people that are now starting to redo and take better care of their yards than what they had in the past.
Mm. Well, that's a good thing. Okay.
Yeah. So when
So I,
people see that, they're kind of like, oh, look, there's, there's something a little bit more going on. I'm seeing things happening when we're driving in. But when they see, houses with weeds that are up to your hips, the grass has now grown those really tall kind of shoots that are going up to your hip, literally. Then it's kind of like, oh, okay, well, that's right across the street from the community. And is it really a safe place? Kind of a thing.
do you think that's a subject that code enforcement can manage?
I think so. I mean, I see them, code enforcement, rolling all around my neighborhood looking to enforce various different things. Making sure that,
What are they running around in Pasadena for?
to make sure we're not doing illegal cement work.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they haven't caught the person with the chickens yet, but
No, is no chicken allowed in Guadalupe?
no chickens are allowed in Pasadena. Well,
Oh.
specifically roosters, but yes, chickens and roosters are prohibited, especially on the Cielo side, because everybody's so much more closer together that can be a noise nuisance very easily.
Is that the site? Why just Pasadena?
That's part of our CCNRs.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yeah, because they were able to put that in, but I know that they do not want roosters because of previous cockfighting issues, I believe, or at least from what I heard from people in
Is that
town.
do you sense that that's the city making those CCNR rules, or the developer?
I know the
Seems to-
developer they were going round and round with the chicken thing, because I had brought up, because I wanted to have a few chicks, and they said, not while you work for us. After then, it's totally on you to break any rules that we don't, we're not condoning anything. But that's one of those where I guess one owner was saying, no, we shouldn't have that in there. People should be allowed to do what they want. And the other people were like, no, this is where the problem can come in. So if we're trying to create a harmonious community, let's not have chickens. So it was a debate that took several months to get through. So that was mostly on them, but I think that was spurring on that the city was kind of like, hey, we'd like something in there so that way it can reduce down how much code enforcement's having to drive around. Because I know, living on the other side of town, I would see code enforcement driving, some years back, at least in the wee hours of the morning, listening, rolling around with their windows down, listening for the roosters.
Oh, dang.
Yeah.
Priorities. Well, so I know that there's been a movement throughout California, at least, of communities that had restrictions on chickens to undo those restrictions and allow them. But all of them have a limit on the number of chickens, and they all say no roosters.
Yeah, I had that with when I lived in Elk Grove. We had to have a certain amount of space that was dedicated to a contained area where they outlined really nice rules for it. I think they did a pretty good job on that, but I never really followed up much with it, since I'm like, I'm too busy with sales right now. I'm not going to mess with chickens. I'd love to have them, but well, now that my mother-in-law's retired, I may want to see about poking around with the city to say, can we look at changing this rule and creating, like, even if I have to pay a chicken license, I don't care. Just to say, hey, I have chickens on the property. I am in a large enough space, I can have a
have chicken,
contained
yeah.
area,
Mhm.
you know, and I sign that I verify that I will not have roosters. I think something like that would be great for the city to do.
I think so too.
Especially since, you know, chickens are pretty easy and cheap to maintain. And for people that might be more income restrictive, I know when I lived in Sacramento, we definitely, when I got into my car accident and couldn't work for 2 years, we had the chickens to be a staple for our fresh eggs because that
Yeah.
was cheaper.
I agree. I mean, I think it's yeah, it'll be an interesting. It seems to me it's an ordinance. I'm not quite on the opinion that the Guadalupe Business Association would move that one forward, but somebody would.
Yeah.
It certainly would be an interesting one, and it certainly would be a value to the community that is a food desert.
Mhm.
Okay, we got slightly off topic, but that's a good example of where governance is important, because, you know, those kinds of subject matters get, just like we know that it's important on governance side to be involved in traffic and congestion issues. Even air quality is a governance issue. Even if they can't manage a lot of the air quality issues, because they tend to be air quality issues outside of the city's jurisdiction, farmland, and wind, which is way out of everybody's jurisdiction. And a lot of the dust and dirt comes from the trucks, and again, they're not in the city's jurisdiction. There is some level of work that they can do with the county, with the air quality board, with the Farm Bureau, in helping support how to manage those issues, in putting more trees in the community and encouraging more trees to manage some of those issues. So there's always some kind of a connection with governance, but I'm wondering if you look at this list, whether there are anything that you see definitely belongs in governance, or maybe definitely doesn't belong in governance.
I think the newspaper thing isn't really a governance issue. That's more
Yeah,
of a community based.
Yeah, where did I put the newspaper?
Up one, over, right there.
There we go. I'm going to use that to say it shouldn't be in there. That's one of them. Anything else?
I don't really see how swimming pool is our, you know, city council's issue.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, you know, it's kind of a 6 of one, half dozen of the other, because in some ways a swimming pool is only going to get built if the city does it and city manages it, or the city hires a non-profit like the Boys and Girls Club to manage it. But I doubt the Boys and Girls Club would build a swimming pool in Guadalupe. So only on that level. But yeah, let's put that out of there.
Yeah, I heard there's somebody that an angel investor that wants to give the money to do it, just not to maintain it.
Yes, and yeah, there is word on that as well. The issue is twofold. One, where piece of land, and then yes, we can build it, but who's going to maintain it? And you know, will fees, you know, having somebody pay $1 to get in, will that cover the operational costs? And the answer is probably not. So there's a need for ongoing operational costs and how that would get paid, which brings us back to the city and funding. A lot of municipal swimming pools tend to be operated by nonprofits now. Because just the city's cost of doing business is too much. Is there anything else that you see that maybe shouldn't be on here under impediments? So I want to ask this question, and maybe you can answer this one, Belinda. There were a number of comments around a lack of emergency services, but there was also a lot of comments that this was a safe, peaceful community, that the fire and the police department were good, and there was no issues with them. They were good to the community. They were an asset to the community. So my thought is that that's probably focused on the fact that there's not a great amount of medical services in town, that the ambulance service is probably not that good because there's no ambulance directly connected to the city and its fire department, police department. Some cities have them connected and some don't. So in the city's case, there is no ambulance service that's part of the city.
Yeah.
There's no hospital. So when I saw lack of emergency services, I saw it around medical, not public safety. Is that your sense too?
Yes. Actually, my husband was just involved in a very nasty car accident at the 166 and Obispo intersection.
No.
Yeah.
Is he okay?
Walked away unscathed. I don't even know how with the look of that car. But and the other driver as well, because he T-boned somebody that he didn't see. The ambulance, I think it took them about 10 minutes to get there, but I want to say police and fire, Santa Maria, because we're, I think, approximately 10 miles away from the Santa Maria hospital, so
yeah,
it's easy for that to come out quickly. But fire and police were, my husband was like, it's like I just lifted my head and they were already there. I go, well, you were literally half a mile from them, so it's not going to take them long to get there. So anytime I've ever seen an emergency happen, fire and police are very quick throughout the city. I mean, we're only 1.5 miles long, so it's not hard to get everywhere. But yeah, definitely the lack of doctors, lack of ambulance, if there should be an emergency. I think that's where more people hesitate with us. And, you know, when somebody's having a heart attack, 10 minutes can be a long time.
Yes. Yeah.
I know I've opted to drive myself in instead of calling an ambulance because it was going to be faster.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that makes sense when you can do it. All right. So that was my sense from hearing people talk about this. I just wanted to get a second opinion on that. If you were to look at these impediments, did you see anything else that you said doesn't necessarily go with the city council?
I think the rest of them really tie in. The only thing I would note with that pollution/air quality is also sound pollution. The air cannons that are used for the birds, sometimes that can get very annoying because they'll be going off every 5 minutes in the middle of the night, the entire night.
During the night?
Yes. Yeah, there was one cannon that just kept, like, the entire Pasadena community page was just like, how is this still going on right now? You know, I can't sleep. And somebody's like, I hear it over by me over on the Cielo side, but then they hear it, you know, we're hearing it clear as day on the Paseo side as if it was like 2 doors down from me. So they're loud and I sleep with my windows open. So I just had to kind of turn my music up a little higher to drown it out.
Yeah. So how often do those air cannons go off?
It's usually like censored for the birds. So I don't know if we just had a gnarly swarm or if there was coyotes or what, but that particular day was the worst I've ever heard it living here. But um, maybe a few times at night, never
Every
too
night?
much. Uh
So
seasonally.
there's 365 days in the year. How often do you get woke up by air can? Is it always at nighttime? Don't they go off in the day?
They do, but I don't notice them because I
Mhm.
hear the train noise at that point, and I've got, if I'm at work,
Mhm.
I have the work music on, and I don't necessarily hear them.
Gotcha.
Um, yeah, so that would be a question I could easily pose to the Pasadena Facebook page and get feedback because there's some people that are pretty sensitive to sound. I'm not one
Is
of
it,
them.
is your sense that this air cannon is only going on in the fields around Pasadena and not the rest of?
I've never heard them living and growing up on the other side of Guadalupe.
Hmm,
I've only heard them
interesting.
here, and I was kind of like, "What is that noise?" But I never had it on the other side of town. So I don't know
Huh.
if Point Cell Dune houses have this issue since they're close as well. But yeah, I mean, I was on Guadalupe Street just before the bridge, so never heard them there.
Huh.
And I always sleep with windows open, so I just don't hear them.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting one. Um, so they operate based on sensors of whether birds are in the area, and then they send off the cannon. And I'm assuming it's probably seasonal, meaning they only go off while they're in planting.
Hmm. But since now the land doesn't rest, it does happen a bit more frequently.
Yeah, that's true. It's one crop after the other.
Hmm.
Hmm. Okay, I appreciate that extra piece. That was new to me.
But everything
Okay,
else seems pretty good.
okay, these are the impediments. The asset side is actually, I should probably move these around a little bit so we don't have something too far down. So the assets are pretty standard stuff here. From a governance slash public safety perspective, I put small community because you brought up the fact that because this is a small community, both physically, governance should be easier. It's an asset to the governance because they have less roads to manage. They have less infrastructure because it's a smaller community. You can get to accidents on 166 and Obispo pretty quickly. So it's to some degree the small community is an asset. I think the tight knit community piece is the same. I wonder if so. You have an accident on Obispo, and the police and fire are there before you lift your head. For them to do that, somebody had to call,
Hmm.
and it seems to me that's a secondary part of that. How quickly that somebody called police and fire, and that to me says something also about communities, because I don't think that's necessarily true in every community that somebody would call right away. Um, Definitely low crime, and I think this is one of the reasons why Pasadena is doing well, right? It's got a message that this is a low crime area.
Hmm.
Public safety is liked. So does these, again, look like they belong in governance as assets,
Definitely.
strengths? All right. So on the impediment side, are there what would you consider is the most important, or the top three? If you were thinking in terms of the community is a pretty close-knit community. It's poor, working class, and we want to be more resilient in the future. We want to be able to say that if there was a downturn in the market, the community will still tick along. If there was an earthquake, a flood, some kind of a natural disaster, the community would be able to survive. And so if you think of it in those terms, which of these impediments would be the most important to strengthen?
Well, from a environmental standpoint, like flood, since that is a real threat to us, and we can easily get cut off. I grew up knowing that. The hospital ambulance, having a way to treat people, I would say that's going to be top.
No local
And
hospital, no ambulance. We had this in another place as well, didn't we?
lack of emergency services.
Yeah, there it is. I
Yeah.
thought there was I thought I saw it kind of. So I'll join those and rewrite them into a statement. Okay.
I think that the lack of the bilingual services
This
is
one
towards
down
the
here.
top.
Yeah, I'm gonna.
Because there was one a little higher up, I think, that I had
This
seen.
one here as well. Yeah.
And educational / language attaining, so 40%. Oh, okay.
This
Well,
one,
I kind of see that as partially kind of going, but yeah, the lack of information, because I know my friend, she works with Santa Barbara County, and she does, you know, the translations for emergency events, and that's not something that I think we necessarily have here or that I'm aware of.
Yeah, I think, you know, a lot of we have. Yeah, so I think there's a resilience is the ability on some level to get to the most vulnerable, the most disadvantaged. And we have a whole group of individuals that don't speak English, but not only that, they don't write in Spanish. They don't read in Spanish. They just speak in Spanish. And that's when you think about resilience, you go down to that level and say, if you can get to them, you can get to anybody in your community. So I think the education is one of those things of we need to be able to, it's like what we used to have with bilingual education, you know, decades ago, where it was legitimate bilingual education, where you're speaking the language and at the same time teaching them the language so that they can understand what's going on. And if you don't have the services there for people that want to learn English, and you don't have the services there for people that you can tell them everything that's going on in their language, then it stalls. And to me, it's a question of doing both. So I see this education and the bilingual piece and the transparency all being the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
Is that your sense too?
Yes, I think they're all really tied within each other. It's kind of hard to separate one from the other.
Okay. And a third one?
I think it's going to be probably the food desert, that I have to go to Santa Maria to get everything really that I'm looking for. I think we do lose money, you know, on since we don't have food tax, but on other little things that I would buy, buying toilet paper and all that, all those little cents add up
Oh yeah, for
to
sure. Yeah.
to drive more money into the town. So I think that that's a big driver there too.
Did you put that on there? So let me clarify, because under health and well-being and in the focus groups on that, the food desert was very clearly an issue and a priority, but it was there as a priority on the basis of not good, healthy food. We need a supermarket, we need a farmer's market, we need community gardens, because we need people to eat more healthy and address the food desert. You're sounding more on the side, if I was hearing it, of the lack of revenue to the city.
It's, again, I kind of see it as both. I see that the critical aspect is the health aspect, but I see it from the business side of, if we had these businesses available, if we had local farmers markets, that may not necessarily impede if somebody like my mother-in-law, oh my God, she can grow parsley like no tomorrow, and I've got 10 bunches of parsley that I have to give away. But if she had some place that it's easy to, like, oh, here I've got, like if it's like a farmer's market, she could just go and be like, here, I want to sell my extra little bunches. That I could kind of see as tying in for, especially people in Guad that have these larger plots of land to do small little vegetables and be able to sell off their extra, aside from having their own healthy food that they have. But I don't know if that's tied to time then, but I think it's definitely the health aspect, but then also from the economic standpoint of what these markets can do.
And that's the reason I bring that up, is because we've got things like no TOT, low sales tax, obviously vacant buildings, city doesn't have a lot of money. So there's quite a few in that subject matter. And I'm wondering if I should group those as a priority, as well as this food desert issue.
I think they definitely could intermingle with each other. Yeah.
Yeah, because I'm my instinct is these subject matters centered around business leakage, vacant buildings. If the building's vacant, nothing's being sold. If nothing's being sold, there's no revenue coming in. Absent landlords. So would you put them all together or keep them separate?
I think that they could be like if you had that one, like the food desert to the center, they would be one spoke of that wheel.
Yeah,
it would definitely be a spoke to that, driving off of it, because it is all kind of interconnected to that.
Yeah, we get a lot of dollars that are leakage out of Guadalupe to Santa Maria. And some of that issue is related to just the nature of the size of the community. There's never going to be a shopping mall in Guadalupe. There's not probably going to be a Walmart or a Best Buy or any of the big stores. So people are, in other words, are always going to go to Santa Maria for something, even if it's just jeans and sweaters and suits, you know what I mean? But there is some leakage that should stay in Guadalupe. And
because I think of it like as
supermarket is one.
Yeah, like JJ's Market, in Napomo, where they're not super big. They're not a Walmart type thing, but they've got a little bit of everything, and they've got a good solid veg section and a lot of healthy food options, that it makes it very easy to find, well, having that small town feel without being scrubbed to look like a Bonds that could be anywhere in the state kind of thing. I think I could see where that could help, because if I need batteries, instead of having to spend a lot and have batteries laying around through the Costco pack, I could just run, down
the road.
the
Yeah, yeah,
street, and I've now suddenly got it. So when they carry a variety of things like that, it's like, oh, cool. I didn't know I could find that there. Now I know it's there. I don't have to always run out and get that and wait until I go to Santa Maria, because I wait. I wait until I have a lot of several things that I need to do, and then I go get it
Yeah.
all done at once. Whereas
Yeah.
here, I'd be more likely to impulse buy here
Mhm.
than I would be in Santa Maria.
Have you got in negotiations with JJ's yet?
No, I don't know anybody that's going to be coming in, but I'd love to have either like a Vallarta or a JJ, something that's going to be still family owned and not on a big national level. But that's my
Good.
personal preference.
Yeah, I think there's definitely conversations about that. So I think you're probably in the right direction, because it may not be just that big enough for them to. The community's growing, the population size is getting bigger. I'm curious to see what 2020 shows. I don't think 2020, for everybody's purposes, will get into this resilience plan. I think we'll still be using the older data, just because it's not going to be ready in time. But it would be interesting to see what 2020 shows up. So I think that goes into the same thing. I think that does too. What about absent landlords?
Somebody other than Lupe owns in town?
Yeah. There's a yeah. Well, there's
I don't know that many of them other than Lupe. He's literally the one that I know that owns most things. So in my mind, I just assume he has it all.
No, there's a mixture of people that own downtown. I know, for example, there's three vacant lots on Guadalupe Street before you get to 10th Street. And on 10th Street and Guadalupe, that's the city's own property, where where it's under remediation, environmental remediation. But then there's two other sites next to it that are vacant, that are not owned by Lupe. I know that. And they don't want to do anything with it. And what's the old building that's boarded up? Is it?
Oh, that had been.
Yeah,
I think that's on 10th.
Yeah, that's a
and that was
family-owned.
knocked off its foundation, I believe, when there was the explosion at the gas station across the street.
Yeah, well, that building is not Lupe's either. So I know there are some. I know Guadalupe Cafe, for example, is owned by the operators.
Yes, I think he lives down the street from me.
Oh, I didn't know he lived in Guadalupe.
Well, if that guy, if what he said was right, then he had purchased that. But I don't know if I don't know how it's all tied. Because I know Garrett from GBA was talking to a younger fella, and he was talking as if he was an owner. So I was like, oh, okay, there's probably multiple partners with that then.
It's family, as far as I know. And the owner of the Guadalupe Cafe has a cleaning service.
Then it is the guy down the street from me. Yeah.
Yeah, he has a cleaning service that does Santa Barbara County. Yeah. So he's the owner. I didn't know he lives in Pasadena.
Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, probably about 6 houses down from me, I think.
Oh, cool.
Roughly. Yeah.
Small town. So I think I've got my priorities. Garrett, did you want to add anything more from your perspective? And don't worry, we don't care about your children's noise.
They're out for a walk. I mean, I think I see, to me, it seems like there's a lot of potential for community organizing, like a lot of community-led projects, for like, beautification efforts, local cleanups, community murals, things to kind of activate, just a lot more volunteer engagement and just help build community pride. That doesn't cost a lot of money.
Yeah.
And, sometimes it takes a city to step back or abdicate, some role and responsibility in order for the community to kind of take ownership of something. And so maybe some of it is really just like allowing for, if the city does have some parcels and they're not being utilized, or if the city is essentially ordering landlords to abandon them or something like that, then what could the city allow for in its place that the community could help to activate? Could it be some kind of like permanent farm stand, that, like Belinda was saying, that could bring local producers and growers, but doesn't necessarily have to have, the same kind of official connotations as like a full farmer's market, or something like a small business kind of warehouse. If they provide the roof space and they can give everyone a 10 by 10 spot, in a building, what kinds of small businesses could be created and fostered if people were just given like a small, modest lease agreement. So I think, things like that, thinking a little bit more creatively and thinking about, what could be community led rather than city led. There's an organization that I think of, like it's called Pacoima Beautiful, and it's located in LA County, but it's a small kind of low income community, a lot of environmental justice issues, but it's a nonprofit and they really focus on a lot of different aspects of kind of community beautification, whether it's culture or actual like cleanups and murals and things like that, or
What was the
youth
name of the town?
engagement. Pacoima Beautiful. I'll share it here. So, yeah, I think, looking at when you think about the assets and activating them, it's really the people.
And this is where this becomes important. The already existing nonprofit service organizations, and what can they pick up?
Yeah, and then another kind of maybe replicable model would be to think about, just the networking. Isla Vista, they have a Isla Vista like network, community network or something like that, and it's basically, I think, a monthly or some regular meeting that they have with a lot of the major organizations and some businesses in the community. I'm not quite sure how they, what things that they're particularly organized around, but I think it just provides a space for them to talk about community issues and start coming up with different solutions and ideas.
Yeah, I think that's one of the goals of Los Amigos de Guadalupe, is to start very similar to creating the business association around business networking, is creating a network for all of the agencies, social service agencies in town, to meet on a regular basis and do exactly what you said. Even to some degree, pointing out their needs and whether they need 20 volunteers, and we can get the other organizations to bring in the volunteers on that day, or do things like you say, which is what are our priorities in our community and how can we all do our bit. there isn't that connection between the nonprofits and the service organizations that would be useful in a small town. Okay. Anything else, Garrett, Belinda? I'll take what we did today, and like we've done in the past 2 weeks, is I'll summarize it tonight and then keep going to see if there's any other opinions and use this sheet for that purpose. But the website has this chart except for these focus group pieces, but all of the prior focus groups have been recorded and put online, so you can always go back and look at them and see if there's anything you see that you feel is important to add, and you can always email and let us know if there's something you think is glaringly missing. The process still has a lot to do. We'll probably at the end of these focus groups is summarize everything we've gotten and take it to the leadership team, and then from the leadership team take it to a large stakeholder group. And I think we're getting ready to do some in-person stuff coming up. I think I'm keeping my fingers crossed that we'll have an in-person stakeholder group pretty soon to wrap up all of the big subject matters and then get to what we would consider a draft version for public comment. So thank you very much for your time today. I appreciate you guys sitting in. And more will be coming.
Excellent.
Great. Thanks, Tom. Nice to meet
Thanks,
you.
guys.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thanks,
it.
Tom.
Thanks, Belinda.